Here on the web of Bible studies or perhaps a sermon series that we're going through. We hope that you're finding the material edifying and helpful in your walk and growth in knowledge and grace of Jesus Christ, because that certainly is our intent. We wanted to take, though, before we get started, this moment just to remind all of you that if indeed you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, feel free to go ahead and email us at billw@cgi.org. That's billw@cgi.org. Feel free to write at any time through the course of the presentations, because we want to know what you're thinking, and if indeed we're missing something that you'd like us to address, to draw our attention to it. So don't forget, ask some questions or make some comments and help us out with some feedback. We certainly do appreciate that as well. And again, that address is billw@cgi.org. And go ahead and feel free to do it at any time. So right now, without any further delay, let's get back to the sessions that we're studying this week.
All right. Hello again. I wanted to pick up a little bit on where we had left off on part 3 of this Mark of the Beast topic that we've been going through. And if I can, let me recommend that our approach on this particular subject should be viewed as informative, much like a Bible study. Hopefully, some of the things that we're exploring, which, by the way, the title of this is Questions About the Beast's Mark. And so, suffice it to say, we're exploring the events, the circumstances, conditions, and details surrounding what the Bible has to say about this particular mark of the beast that ultimately is in the script and, of course, is portrayed to occur in the latter days. And as I said some time ago in the previous parts, I forget now whether it was part 1 or part 2, that the backdrop of where we are today in reality, in real time, today, in the state and condition of the world and the things that are going on with the development of technology, along with all of the political ramifications and trends that we see surrounding us, certainly is a very fitting time to, at this time, at least consider some of this very serious information with respect to the mark of the beast, while we're not emotional about it. Because there's going to come a time when this is going to be part of our choices. It's going to be on the table, and you're going to have to make a choice. And the choice is going to be either you take it or you don't. So I think it's important that, in all due respect to the circumstances and how it relates to us as Christians, that we should be at least informed on our approach and our view and how we should look at it in terms of what it means. And so, as we were approaching Revelation chapter 13, where we were beginning to be introduced to the beast for the first time, even though we understood back in part 1 that the 2 witnesses were actually responsible to witness to the beast, and yet we had not yet been introduced until chapter 13, 2 chapters later, which is an interesting, again, illustration of how the book of Revelation works, because it is not so much always in a orderly sequence. It is certainly within set chapters and different events that are going on that are out of sequence, comparably speaking. But we were beginning to explore and see how chapter 13 of the book of Revelation was related to Daniel 7. And the same beasts that were listed there in Daniel 7 are in fact identifiable in Revelation 13. And we can see that very clearly, and of which then gives us the understanding, as I pointed out before, and certainly should not in any way, shape, or form change our minds about what God is telling us through His Scriptures, in that this is a Greco-Romanish, Babylonish system. And as a matter of fact, the Bible calls this coming world-ruling beast Babylon mystery. Babylon, he points out, and that basically is the label that is used throughout the Bible to describe this end-time beast. And so we talked about a little bit in the previous part about the technologies that we have and how these telephones, even while I'm speaking, even though it's off, is probably able to hear me. If they want to listen to me, they can listen to me, every word that I'm saying, because that's just the way it is. This phone could be on your kitchen table, and you could be talking to your wife about certain things, or your husband about certain things, and they're listening to you. And if you got this off or in another room, they could be listening to you if you have a smart television through your television, and or if you've got a smart microwave, you could be listened to even through that. As a matter of fact, I find myself constantly amazed over, I'm talking to somebody about, a new pair of shoes, or I'm in the market for buying a new tie or a new car or whatever it may be, and all of a sudden, an hour, 2 hours later, I've got on my phone popping up little ads about a car or about the tie. And I'm thinking, how did that happen? I'm not even on the internet searching for anything like that. And here, lo and behold, I'm getting pop-up ads about a conversation that I had with somebody. Amazing. It's amazing. But it goes to illustrate that the time and the day and age that we're living in is a very well-developed and developing technological age. I mean, we haven't seen anything yet in terms of where all of this could, in fact, be leading us. We covered a little bit also about the narratives of the mainstream media and how they attempt to affect us with their selective influence and steering us with stories that they cherry pick and of which spin in certain ways to develop your outlook and your particular view or your particular impression on how they want you to digest this information or view this information. And I think what happened this last Wednesday is a perfect example of that, and how it was portrayed to be essentially the president's fault, when in fact, in many respects, as time will go to prove, I believe, we will see that it wasn't that at all, as the identified individuals become more clearly understood and who they are in the next coming days or so, as we see that play out. And we saw all of how that can be very dangerous, because obviously it can manipulate the ideas and minds of you and me. We're all subject to this, and that's why we've got to be so careful about how and what we allow into our minds to begin to embrace, believe, and proceed with whatever changes and behaviors that are indeed going to affect us. And as I mentioned before, all of us have gone through this in one way or another when we came into God's church, right? Because we learned certain information. It compelled us to take certain action after we embraced the knowledge, and it generated changes of view, changes of outlook, changes toward our lifestyle. And that's what happens when, in fact, you do begin to adopt certain information that does indeed have an effect on you. And in chapter 13 and verse 4, we came down to finally some words. The first word was this word worship, proskuneo. And we came to understand the meaning of this particular word was essentially to pay homage or to adore, to reverence, lick like a dog, we were told the word can even mean. As a matter of fact, if you recall, John Nicoletti in his presentation, when he talked about the origins of Christmas some weeks ago, talked about, again, when Satan asked Jesus while he was being tempted those 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness there, and Satan, the last offer Satan said to Jesus was, will you proskuneo me? That's what it was about, proskuneo. In other words, lick my feet, concede, capitulate, surrender, Jesus, and I'll give you all of this. That's what he was saying. Same word. Same word. And a time is coming, brethren, when people are going to proskuneo the power behind the beast. It says here that in verse 4, they worshiped the dragon. That's Luciferian. That is basically demonic. That is, for all intents and purposes, people, whether they know it or not, when they proskuneo this system, because it says also further down in verse 4, if you'll notice, and unto the beast they worshipped, that is proskuneo, they worshipped the beast. So they worshipped the power behind the dragon, and in so doing, worshipped the government, the beast. You see, proskuneo, both words, worshipped, are from the same common Greek as was what Satan said to Jesus in Matthew 4. Same word. This is an important word because what God is telling us through the Apostle John is that people are going to get to the point where they will surrender to this government that is driven by Luciferian doctrine, standards, values, and will indeed represent a demonic power. Today, we have the same thing going on. There is a lot of Luciferian associations with a lot of organizations today that most people don't even recognize. And you can go back and review this yourself, going back to the groves of California over by Napa and Sonoma into the 50s, where many CEOs and leaders of governments as well as major corporations partook and participated in rituals at night with bonfires going off and doing who knows what. Well, I could tell you a little bit, but I'm not going to go there. But the reality of it is, this has been going on for a long time, brethren, a long time. And Satan, the devil, has been here since the Garden of Eden, working his dastardly deeds within the governments of man and within the society and social structure and hegemonies of corporations as well as countries and nations. And it's very, very important that we all begin to recognize it for what it is. Because as we go down further into time and get closer to this writing of what John was saying here, it is going to become more obvious that the distinctions and the conflicts and the contrast between what God represents and what the government represents is going to become more clearer and more concise and more recognizable for each and every one of us. And it is important for all of us to understand that at some point, choices, Christian choices, will have to be made because that's what your Bible is warning us about. Notice, as we went ahead and proceeded to verse 16 of Revelation 13, we come across the word, in this particular case, poieo. And in verse 16, we are told, and he, that is this beast, this false prophet, because we understand in verse 14, a second beast comes, another beast, verse 11, we're told, he has the power, verse 14, to work miracles. He's going to become very convincing. You're going to see things that you have got to admit are supernatural. And many people will be swayed by this, thinking that this is from God, and consequently confused in mixing the signals and accepting the fact that these miracles are from God being portrayed by this individual. And they will be convinced to accept it. Many, what did Jesus say in chapter 24 of the book of Matthew? Luke 21, Mark 13. What did he say? Many, not a few, many will be deceived into thinking that wrong is right and right is wrong. Today we've got Christian denominations today who believe that abortion is right. They won't speak out on this issue because they think it's political. They won't speak out on homosexual marriages. Did you hear that? I just had to do that. My point is, there are Christian, and this is what I want you to understand, because what's happening and what I'm talking about is already happening. And we ain't anywhere near this. We're not even anywhere near this. People are already conceding. They're already compromising. They're already giving in. Kind of like what we're seeing in the political realm of today's machinations here in the United States. The revelations of who are really the nationalists, who really believe in the Republic of the United States as opposed to the socialistic leanings of those among us, and are now exercising leadership to us. Oh yeah, you can now begin to mark them. You could begin to see them for what they are as they stood up and said, no, 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 we don't want an audit. I digress, but my point is made. And all I'm trying to do is show choices have to be made. You are in the midst of an event in similitude. In similitude. Grasp it, brethren. It's important you grasp these procedures and processes that bring us to believe this over this. And ask yourself, why do I believe this? This is my left. And why do I believe this? This is my right. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And I say it in jest, but there is truisms to this that I hope all of us are learning by observation how these processes work, because they are insidious. Satan, the devil, is insidious. He does things through incrementalism. That's his technique. Slowly, the proverbial frog in the pot, with the heat being turned up slowly. And you get comfortable before you realize you're being cooked. You're being cooked. And so it is that in this case, it comes down to the point, and I come back full circle to verse 16, Revelation chapter 13. And he poeo all. He poeo all. He causes all. Both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. And we left off with the word poeo and its meaning, which we, for the sake of reiteration and reminding you, I will reiterate, it means to commit. It means to execute. It means to secure. And that last word, do you remember what I said it was also able to mean? It means mandate, require. So, and he mandates, or he secures all. He mandates all. He requires all. That's what this government is going to do. Both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to be given. That's what that Greek syntax can be interpreted as. To receive. To receive. And here is the word we want to come up on. Kharagma. Kharagma. Interesting word. Extremely interesting word. Many of us have been led to believe the mark of the beast over the years, rightly so. Nothing wrong with this, because I firmly believe, going back, and let me take you there, to Daniel chapter 7 for a moment, because I think this is important for all of us to be reminded of, because certainly what we were originally taught, in lieu of Sunday being a mark, will certainly and plausibly be part of the recipe. We see that, we base that understanding on chapter 7 of the book of Daniel, where in the description of the fourth beast, which will indeed be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, verse 23, which shall be diverse from all the kingdoms. This is Daniel 7, verse 23, shall be diverse from all the kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth. Will devour part? A smidgen? No. The whole earth. This system is going to become global. It is going to become the new world order. It is going to become a controlling force on the whole, according to Daniel, earth. And shall tread it down and break it in pieces. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. They coalesce their power, as we understand in Revelation 17, to operate at the behest of the tyrant, the beast. They pool their assets together, and as a socialistic commune, a coalesced union of nations, powers, give their assets and empowerment to the beast for a short time. In biblical terminology, 1 hour. But in verse 25, this is where I was going, he says, and he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints. That means those that are following Jesus Christ. Context here from the words of Daniel are those that are the God, those are of God, the God of the Hebrews. It's not the Muslims. It's not the Hindus. We're talking in context here. Daniel is specific. He's talking about the saints. That is our group, our lot. And this government is going to wear them out. In verse 21, you read, I beheld, and the same horn made war, talking again about this fourth kingdom, with the saints, and prevailed over them. And as I've often said, so much for the rapture. There is no rapture. The saints are going to be plugged into the action and sadly become collateral damage. They will be worn out and they will be prevailed upon. What is the fifth seal, we're told? Christian martyrdom, back in Revelation 6. It's all sequential. It all fits. There's a continuum here. One block on top of the other, one line to the next dot. It all matches to provide a tremendous story. A deep story. A saga, as a matter of fact. But here he says in verse 25, going back, he shall wear out the saints of the Most High and think. I like that. He thinks, but he doesn't. He thinks, in his mind, he thinks. The beast does, he thinks, but he doesn't, because God's the only one that can change, in this case, times and laws. But the beast thinks to do so. And we have used that to launch off the fact that certainly Sunday keeping could very well be, and I certainly believe it, part of the recipe, part of the makeup of this mark of the beast. And let me just digress here to bring your attention to the European Sunday Alliance. The European Union actually has an alliance group that is in fact busy about making Sunday the common day of rest throughout the European Union, along with the Pope, of course. I could have articles upon articles up here to share with you that would also connect us with the Catholic Church and its insistence in trying to advance Sunday as the common day of rest for all of those on earth, as a matter of fact. But that's another story. I figured most of you would know that, but I don't know how many of you know there's an actual Sunday keeping alliance, an initiative, a movement within the European Union. Let me just go ahead and quote this for a moment. European Day for a work-free Sunday. And this is dated today, Saturday. This is Saturday, although it goes back to March 3rd, I guess, when this initiative began. I didn't really investigate that. But it says here, call for action. Every year, the European Sunday Alliance calls on all members and supporters to take action as a European Day for Work-Free Sunday. This year, a call invites you, Europeans, our members and supporters, as well as affiliated persons and organizations, to become active and to send us statements and pictures why a work-free Sunday is so special. This is going on in Europe, trying to make it law. The Sunday special call is meant to gather impressions and opinions from all over Europe. Show us your particular view about the value of a work-free Sunday. And then they go on and they say, tell us what you do. Time for the family, time to watch football, time to go to church, time to do nothing, time to brunch or walk in the forest, time to engage in community work. And they go on all these things. Tell us. Go on your social mediums and give us pictures of your family and what you do on Sunday. Brussels, again, from the European Sunday Alliance. We already know the Catholic Church is promoting this. But this is a group that is underscoring and also behind the scenes, in addition to pushing for the induction of Sunday as a common day of rest. Ahead of the European elections, what is next for a work-free Sunday? Brussels. This goes back to February 18th, 2019. Quote, in view of the EU elections, the European Sunday Alliance discussed with members of the European Parliament and electoral candidates the importance of common work-free time and decent working hours. In view of the European elections, the European Sunday Alliance discussed with members of the European Parliament and the electoral candidates the importance of common work-free time and decent working hours. They've got other issues too with overtime and so on. And here's another one, same thing with regard to the country of Croatia. And so on. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to illustrate to you as a support item here in this regard that this Sunday law, this Sunday keeping initiative, this effort to make Sunday the official day of rest is not only being promoted by the Catholic Church, which it is, but there is a whole different Sunday keeping alliance formation that is driving these initiatives too, to make Sunday a common day of rest for all peoples. So without a doubt, I'm convinced that, as Daniel 7 here says, that there will be changes of laws, there will be changes of times, and of which will be then advanced and enforced with consequence and penalty if not obeyed. And certainly that would give the beast reason to wear out and, of course, to subdue the Christians, which obviously would not be adhering to a law like that. But I want to go back to this word that we have come up with on this word mark, and of which is so important to understand and to begin to recognize Kharagma for what it means and for what it is indicative of, because I think it is very interesting that it not only could mean what we just talked about with regard to Sunday, but Kharagma means, you ready for this? Interesting. It means scratch. It means etching. If you've got a concordance on your telephone, I encourage you, look this up. It means etching, scratch. It means a stamp. They stamped the Jews during World War II as they marched them off to Dachau and Auschwitz. It means also, even could mean, indicative of, based on the context, sculptured, a sculptured etch, a sculptured scratch. Interesting. I want to just review some applications of this word in your New Testament, and I looked the word up on where it's used throughout the Bible. If you would, go to Acts chapter 17 for a moment. Acts chapter 17. Interestingly enough, this word is used in verse 29 as Paul is addressing the philosophers. And he comes down to verse 29 and he says, "For as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, Kharagma by art, sculptured by art." Kharagma, marked, you could put mark in there, because it's translated mark in Revelation 13. Kharagma, by art and man's devices. Interesting use of the word Kharagma, translated now in the English as opposed to mark, it's translated there graven. Let's go back now to Revelation. And in verse 16 and 17, we pretty much see where this word is used. Let's move on to chapter 14, where we're told about how this mark is viewed by God. Verse 9, chapter 14, the third angel followed them. I'm not going to talk too much about context. I just want to stay focused on the word here for the sake of time. Followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast, and that word there again is proskuneo, the beast and his image, that is, if you bow down, you lick like a dog to that government, you basically admire and adore that government, and that's what that's talking about there. God is saying that. The beast and his image, and receive his Kharagma in his forehead and in his hand. Verse 10, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. God is not going to like us if we get this thing. He's pretty clear about that right here. If you ever forget that, and you got to make a choice, the best choice and only choice, don't take it. Say no. Say no. Make sure that's your choice and concede to the consequences, as Daniel did in the lion's den, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did in the furnace. Submit yourself to the consequences and say, as those three guys said, Nebuchadnezzar, we don't know if God's going to protect us, but what we do know is we're not bowing down and licking your boots. No way. So, do what you will. It's going to take courage, brethren, to go forward in what we have ahead of us and taking these positions. Chapter 15, and in verse 2, we read this. And I saw, as it were, again, no context, I'm just going ahead into the scriptures here for the sake of time, sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his Kharagma, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having harps of God. In this case, again, these did not take the Kharagma. They rejected it and did not accept it. Chapter 16, verse 2, and the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the Kharagma, which had the scratch, which had the etch. They had the stamp. These people basically here of the beast had themselves grievous sores put upon them because they had the etch, they had the stamp, they had the mark. 19, verse 20, we read here, same thing, verse 20. And in this case, we read, and the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet, that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the Kharagma, the mark, of the beast, the etch, the stamp, or the scratch, and worshiped the image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. And the last one in chapter 20 and in verse 4, real quickly here, 20 verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they that sat upon them, judgment was given unto them, and I saw souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of the Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, nor had received his stamp, his etch, his mark, his Kharagma, did not receive it, upon their foreheads and in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. Of course, the millennium, and verse 5 talking about the second resurrection. Now, going back to chapter 13, Revelation chapter 13, we read this interesting thing, and the Bible makes it very clear. He says here, no man may buy or sell, or let me go back to verse 16. He that causes, poeo, all them, mandates all, he mandates them all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a scratch, to receive an etch, to receive a stamp, to receive a Kharagma. That's what we're reading here. Or the name of the beast and the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him that understands count the number of the beast. And oh boy, did we have all kinds of conspiracy thinking about this number, 666, and how it, calculates out to Rome and all of this and that with Roman numerals and what have you. But I want to bring your attention to something, brethren. It says here is wisdom, let him that understands count the number of the beast, for the number is the number of a demon. 666, we've all been told, is the number of Satan. No, it's not. It's the number of a man. He's related to Satan by virtue of the dragon empowering him. He's even demon-possessed, we find out later on. But the number is a number of man. Why is that important? Because what you see this guy do, he's not supernatural. He's mortal. It's important you recognize that too. He is not the manifestation of Satan the devil. He is a man. Now, he is demon-possessed. Your Bible says a demon comes out of his mouth. That's later on. We're not going there. But my point being, this guy is a mortal human being, and he is a man that is going to take control of the whole world, him and his false prophet. Now, the fact remains here that we receive this Kharagma, verse 16, in their right hand or in their foreheads, either one or both. Either one or both. Now, over in Exodus chapter 13, I think it's important for us to begin to understand a little bit about, well, what does this mean? What do you mean forehead, right hand? In chapter 13 of the book of Exodus, and in verse 15, we break into the context here. It came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let it go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of the beast. Therefore I sacrificed to the Lord all that opened the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And he goes on here, and it shall be for a token upon your hand and for your frontlets between your eyes. Your frontlets between your eyes is right here, your forehead. He says here, therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that opens the matrix, being males, but for the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thine hand, and for thy frontlets between thine eyes, for by strength of the hand of the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. In other words, it's very symbolic that God recognizes your mind and your energy, your power, your action. Over here in Deuteronomy chapter 11, just to establish some premises here of this terminology used there in Revelation 13, Deuteronomy chapter 11, and in verse 18 we read, therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul. Bind them for a sign upon your hand, your work, that they may be as frontlets in your mind, as they may be your motivation, your driving forces, your embracement, your ideas. Make your work mine, from your mind to your hands, basically is what he's saying here with this particular terminology in verse 18. Let me read again. Therefore shall you lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, in your being. This is part of you. This becomes you. And bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. Ezekiel chapter 9. Let's go back to Ezekiel chapter 9. and in verse 4, for the sake of time, we'll just go one more here. And in verse 4, it says this, "And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark." Now, this is not Kharagma, this is Hebrew. We're not in the Greek, this is Hebrew. But set a mark, okay, a sign, upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. In their minds, their hearts are compassionate toward what they're seeing. They're empathetic toward what they're seeing. And those are marks and connections that are associated with God. And this word, basically, forehead, comes from the word metopon, and essentially means basically forehead, but it's also a derivative of meta. And when you put the two together, it talks about essentially your association, your fellowship, the accompaniment, you're being joined to. The implication is you're joining to. You're in association with. You are part of. You are endorsing. You're embracing. You have basically taken it into your mind and have translated a certain adoration, fellowship, friendliness to it. And Revelation 13 is all about that. Because who receives the Kharagma and allows it to penetrate into their mind, whereby they go ahead and proskunama, and worship it, and essentially embrace it, they're in trouble. They're in trouble as far as God is concerned. And he says here their right hand. And hand, basically, obviously, and I think many of you have already seen that, comes from the Greek word kier. I think that's how you say it. And it means power or grasping. Grasping power. When you take an oath, notice it said right hand. You don't raise your left hand. Sorry about that, all you lefties. There were good left-handed pitchers in baseball, good left-handed quarterbacks in football too. But the right hand, when you raise your right hand and swear on the Bible in court, or you raise your right hand and you take an oath or make a commitment to some kind of a contract, it's always raise your right hand, not raise your left hand. Raise your right hand. You'll not ever notice that. I don't know if you have, but that's what God is talking about too. And the same thing here goes to the case here in verse 16 of Revelation 13, receives the Kharagma in their right hand or in their foreheads. And that's about making that contract, making that oath, giving themselves up to, surrendering, conceding, capitulating you as a being to this system, so that you can become the recipient of, the beneficiary of this benefactor called the beast, who, as I said, if you haven't done this already, read Revelation 18. This is quite a worldwide, very rich and wealthy system. And yes, Revelation 18 does describe the demise of the beast, but as I said before, read between the lines. Notice the impact of what is being taken down and the reaction of the people of the world as they see this system collapse and fall apart. It's an amazing, amazing description also of how rich and wealthy this particular system was, and of which, of course, does go ahead and portray just how effective and influential around the world it became. So these are just some of the scriptures that I wanted to share with all of you in regards to what this mark represents, this Kharagma. And I think it's important that we add to our minds the idea of what this Greek word actually does indeed mean. Been in God's church for a long time. Been in God's church for an awful long time. But frankly, have not heard a lot mentioned with respect to it being a scratch or an etch or a stamp. Haven't heard a whole lot of information about it being some kind of, perhaps, physical device. And where I'm going with this in part 4, because I'm not finishing today. Got one more to go. One more to go, and we'll finish it up. But next Sabbath, I want to take you down a rabbit hole into the technologies of today and what they have in store for us, whether it be artificial intelligence, whether it be nanotechnology, and the many, many things that are in the cyber world that are under development right now in many of the high-tech manufacturing facilities that make chips and computers and different things, and of what certain individuals, leaders that attend that Davos meeting over there in Switzerland, when they go there once a year and discuss the plans for planet Earth and what they have in mind on where we're going to be by the year, you ready for this? By the year 2030. 2030. In other words, they're expecting technological development to be exponential. They're not looking at this linearly. They're looking at it exponentially, because there are quantum leaps that they foresee in the very near future that are going to provide them to open doors like you can't believe, in being able to make this look like a Model T Ford. This is real, brethren. It's the new world order. It's the brave new world that we've entered into. I never thought, when I came into God's church, if I can just take a moment here to be a little bit casual, that we would get to this kind of state of affairs. But it's upon us. It is upon us. There is technology today that we don't even know exists. There are weapons today, just even this electronic pulse bomb, this EMP, electromagnetic pulse bomb, that can take out all of the electronics. You ever see those space movies? Matter of fact, I was just watching one with my grandson. What was it? What was the movie I was watching with Preston just the other night? And they used, War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds, that's what it was, with Tom Cruise. Did you ever see that movie, Tom Cruise? And how all the cars stopped, they couldn't run? Remember that movie way back in the 60s or 50s that I saw when I was a kid, called The Day the World Stood Still? Gork, gork, you know, the beam and all that. Remember that movie? And it was black and white, as a matter of fact. It's an old classic. But everything stopped. Well, that's what an EMP does. Everything stops. All the electronics in this thing gets burned up, becomes trash. They can't trace you now. It's over. GPS is gone. But bottom line is, it burns up. It's gone. That just an EMP. You don't even have to drop an atom bomb. Atom bombs and hydrogen bombs are kind of passé now, because, see, what you want is, if you're going to invade somebody, you don't want to destroy all the assets. You want to be able to come in and take them. This way, they don't go ahead and destroy anything. Some years ago, I don't know if I ever shared this story with you. Again, just a casual little sharing here, but in my business of water treatment, I got a call one time to replace some reverse osmosis membranes, basically 1,500 feet under Lake Erie. Under Lake Erie, under the bottom of Lake Erie, not from the top, under the bottom, 1,500 feet from the bottom of Lake Erie. And so the guy called me out there, and I went out there, and sure enough, I went down this elevator. It took us 5 minutes to get down there, because the elevator goes down so slow, 1,500 feet under Lake Erie, out there in Mentor, I think it was, or Ashtabula, I forget now exactly. It was an old salt mine that was essentially abandoned because they took all the salt out of it. Tunnels down there were so big you could have 2 tractor trailers actually passing each other. That's how wide and how high those tunnels were. And they were, that is they, this group that was subsidized by the government, doing research in one little sector of it, because there was still some activity of getting salt out of that mine while we were down there in some other part of it. But in this area where I went, they took me, and it was all basically sealed in plastic. You walked in there, it looked like I was in a space. I was out in, planet Mars or someplace. Everybody was walking around in white gowns, and they had pressure suits on in certain areas because they had clean rooms. They call them clean rooms, where the pressure in the room is about 3, 4, 5, sometimes depending on how clean they want it, even higher pressure than the outer atmosphere of the room where you are. So you look in and you look into this clean room, and there you got all these electronics being manufactured, and it's 5 psi higher to keep things out. You know, it's like a block. You can't get in there. So at any rate, this guy's taking me around and all that, and I said, so, as we're talking, I said, so what are you doing? What are you doing down here? What are you guys making? He said, well, if I told you, I have to kill you. And I said, what? He said, no, I'm just kidding. I said, yeah, and we kind of talked a little bit more and so forth, and what they were doing is they were using high-purity water to grow crystals in these 12,000-gallon dugout cavities that were lined in plastic, and they had all these crystals. Matter of fact, I even have one and used it for a paperweight on my desk. He gave me one. But they were floating in there, and that's how they made these crystals. They grew these crystals in the water in these 12,000-gallon cavities that they filled with RO water. And the RO system, they had 0.45 psi per foot, 1,500 feet. You do the arithmetic, but they had pressure-reducing valves all the way down so that they would only have 50 psi in the feet of the RO. The RO was a pretty big RO. Didn't get the job either. I lost at the competition, but nevertheless, that's another story. But the reality of it was, here what they were doing, they were out of Berkeley, California, and here's the point of my story. They were out of Berkeley, California, and they were researching the technology behind neutron bombs. And they had to be out of the UV light of the sun, and that's why they were down there, like rats in a hole. Dark, I mean, you turn the lights out, you could cut that darkness with a knife. It was so dark when you turn the lights out down there. But they were doing neutron bombs. You know what neutron bombs do? Neutron bombs burn up organic things, but they do not, inert things burn up, as I understand it, those things. So they could drop a neutron bomb, kill all the animals and the people, but the buildings remain. These are some of the technologies that we have that are available today that oftentimes we don't realize are in the world we're living in. So I say that to say this. Part 4, I think you'll find very interesting as we begin to take that one step beyond into the technological world that we are surrounded by that oftentimes goes unnoticed. So we'll be back next Sabbath with Part 4 and hopefully end this.